Guys, welcome back to my podcast, Interconnected. For those of you who have not heard my podcast in the past, I'm all about making connections and seeking the overlaps in life, and not just any overlap, but specifically those overlaps that don't really make sense. I believe that as we seek into those intersections of life that are kind of difficult, that are kind of hard, I believe that we find purpose and maybe even joy, deeper meaning, those things in those places. And my heart is to not shy away from those tensions in life. I think that that's a part of growth, a part of our journey as human beings. So that's who I'm about. Today I want to share with you guys a friend of mine. Her name is Carolyn Iga. She has a very, very interesting background. She has a background in music, has a background in Christian ministry, and also other things, and I'll let her share about those things. Today I wanted to talk to her about one of the most incendiary topics of all time, which is religion and politics. It's one of those areas that we say, let's not talk about at work or at the dinner table, because this is interconnected. I believe that there is meaning, joy, purpose, those things within this topic. So I really want to set that table up. So as we get started, the first thing that I love to do is just give my guests a chance to talk a little bit about your history. So maybe starting off, could you talk about what you're currently doing now, kind of your day-to-day job?
Sure. If I were to define my life, I'd probably pick it in terms of values, and I'd say if you were to ask me who Carolyn is, I would say a minister of God's love. So at the very core. In terms of what I do day to day, I have a music school, and I both own and manage it, but I do have a lot of people managing the day-to-day operations, so that I, at this point, can think more broadly, being more of a, I guess, filling the role that's needed. Right now it's a marketer, sometimes it's an entrepreneur, and a few times a year, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year, I will wear another hat, and that will be as a missionary to the Far East, and I enjoy that a lot. I do have a partner there that we opened a few children's clothing stores out there to help the orphans in the area. So very much very life-giving to me, and
wow.
So.
Wow. So minister of God's love.
I would say that.
And would you say that that's kind of an encompassing of both of these things?
I would say so.
The music store and then also the missionary.
That is the message I carry. I would say so.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, for those of our listeners who don't have a context of missionary or God, could you talk about maybe like this? Could you talk about what a missionary is? Let's use that word.
Sure. I would say it's actually, a definition that I've given myself, having come out of a very, standard church background that had clear positions and definitions. I would say at this point in my life, after having held those positions, and even at certain points in my life strived for these positions, because you have to be trained, and then you get a certain leadership role. I happen to be an associate pastor for 15 years, and for that you need formal training, seminary, and going through the hoops for the various churches, and so it was at points very much an aspiration, and you do it for a while. At this point, though, I have not aspired to be a missionary. I simply found myself doing things that I guess a missionary would do. So it's the easiest way for me to describe what I do, and it's the most something a term that most people can grasp. So it would be more the act of going into some place that's not your home, not a comfortable place, but a new place, and getting to know people, building relationships, and ultimately for me, it's sharing God's love. I think in a more strict sense, if you were an evangelical, which is a stream I came out of, they would say you would be sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'd say that would be the heart of a missionary's work.
Yeah.
I just use a little bit of a more broader umbrella. Over the years, I think I've become not so defined, I suppose, to limit with definitions, what God is doing. And I think the best way to state what I hope to bring is the message of God's love.
Got it. So I love how you, just like as we're going through that, one of the things that pops into my mind is that there's this idea of the institution of the church. And so just like any other institution, like the college institution or the DMV, so to speak, right? You just have these protocols and these titles, and there's a process, right? And so what you're saying is that missionary is a term within the institution of the church that people within the institution understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think, and so in one sense, when you say, I'm a missionary abroad, people within the institution kind of get what that is.
I think so.
And then,
I think so.
But then as we broaden it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like what you kind of just said. It's just something about sharing the love of God. And that's kind of like a broader perspective. And maybe you don't have a certificate for that. Maybe you don't need one.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's the spirit, really the important thing.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I just wanted to touch upon that because I think that will kind of go, as we kind of navigate our conversation, is really talking about, okay, as a church, as the Christian institution, and as a community, as a church, there are these terms, there are also beliefs, and it's kind of all, in one sense, structured so that because it all makes sense within that world. And I think when it gets messy or hard is when we try to take that world and expand it to the world that's outside of the church, maybe into politics, and it kind of gets, then the inside, like the word missionary, it makes sense inside there, but maybe outside, missionary makes no sense. But if we translate it, we're sharing God's love, then it starts making sense. So,
Well, it all makes sense in my head.
Yeah.
I guess I just maybe I ought to connect the dots for
and that's
people.
what today I want to have fun kind of doing, right?
Right.
And I think that's one of the things we'll hope to do in this time. Okay, so could you talk a little bit? We shared some time earlier, maybe a couple weeks ago about your journey as in seminary. Can you talk about that, and also talk about your kind of journey to faith? Like how did you become a Christian?
Yeah, okay. I can actually, let's start more the second question,
Sure.
how I came to faith, because looking back, if you were to ask me this question, say 20 years ago, I would have a date for you. There is like December 11th, I think, 1981, when I gave my life to Jesus, and I said the prayer, and I became a Christian. Now I see it much more, very differently from that, and I just realized, thinking over this question, that there were other points when I think are far more significant in becoming a Christian than that day. I remember one of my earliest experiences of God, it was having a bowling competition with my friends, and I was not by far not the best, and it was for some reason very important to me. So I prayed that I would win.
A bowling competition.
A bowling, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And it was just very important. So I prayed, and I played my best game ever.
Okay.
And so I thought, wow, God is real.
Okay,
Wow,
so
God
at this
cares.
point, you were so you had a context of God.
I had a context that He was out there,
Okay.
and I could pray to Him.
Okay.
And wow, He answered me. That was probably the most convincing thing ever. I
Really?
was probably about 9 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And I avoided church. I hated the thought of it. Friends would invite me. I said, oh, no. In high school, though, I heard at a meeting that, for the first time, that Jesus, who I'd heard about at Christmas, and I knew the name Jesus, but this person at the meeting said that Jesus was the Son of God. And at that point, I just thought, that's right. And I had no argument. I never heard it before, but I just thought, that's right. That's true.
Someone says Jesus is the Son of God, and that's really the first time you heard that concept.
It's the first
right?
time, yeah.
But then for some reason you just felt it was true.
It was
right?
true, yeah. It was just an
And you,
immediate.
You can't really explain it, huh? Or anything? It's
I couldn't. I had no rebuttal. I thought,
Yeah.
oh, that's true.
Huh.
Yeah. So
Wow, okay.
that would be a significant point. And then the third point would be when I went to the beach and I saw a friend get baptized. It was Easter morning, and I now before that day I had that date with sitting down with a counselor, basically saying, would you like to pray with me? And I did, and that was fine to me.
Yeah.
I felt a little tricked. It was a little bit of a trick question for me, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I actually didn't want to see her for a little bit afterwards, because I felt like, what was that? Like I wasn't looking to pray whatever, and now I'm a Christian.
So I imagine
it wasn't
in that prayer time, in that meeting, is when she asked you, do you believe, and the questions that would, if you answer yes to, makes you a Christian. So
well,
she
it
asked
makes
those
no.
questions,
On the contrary, she asked me if I were to die tonight,
Yeah.
would I know that I would be going to heaven? I said, well, 99%, 90%. She said, would you want to know? I said, yeah.
Okay.
She said, well, pray with me. And I prayed, and then she said, congratulations, now you're a Christian. I thought,
So you felt,
I didn't want to be a Christian. That wasn't the question.
So you didn't even.
She didn't
say,
mention
"Do you want to be
that's
a
what it means to be a
Let
Christian.
me
Do
ask
you
this
want?
question.
You right. And I wasn't seeking it. It just was more like a bait, throwing
Yeah.
out like, answer this question, and then I'm going to pray, and then, then you'll be something I never
I just wanted
wanted
to
to
pause there
be.
for a second, because I think that's something that could be. Yeah, I don't like that. I guess it's just that, where it's kind of like where you go into something, like some kind of presentation,
Right.
and then you come out of it receiving something that you didn't sign up for.
Right.
And it's like, you're a Christian. So, okay.
It
so
was
that,
odd to me.
Okay.
It
so
was
that
odd.
was kind of like, okay, you're moving on, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't have the words in my head, or to the understanding to know what was happening, but I just felt funny. I just felt like, no, I don't think I want to be with you for a little while.
Sure.
But a few months later, it was that day when I was on the beach, and as I watched my friend get baptized, I felt it felt like a shower fell over my head, and a warm blanket wrapped around me. And that to me is a tangible sort of relationship that I've since been able to feel with God. And I identified it at that moment as God. It was something outside of myself that just came on me. I felt like a big hug. And
Wow.
and at that moment I thought, I want this. And whatever it is, I want this. And I actually contacted that person. That's the closest person I knew that could give me more information about this. And so I entered into Bible study. It was a very conservative evangelical group.
Okay.
And it was a good group. But it ended up being quite. I want to. I guess you use the word controlling. They spelled out what was right and what was wrong, and for a teenager, you just do what they tell you. So it didn't take much thinking to go along with that. All I knew, I was very fervent. No, I was very zealous, and I did share with almost everyone that I knew. Well, yeah.
Yeah. So
I was.
like people might say like a Jesus freak or something.
Sure,
so like you're out there
sure.
sharing, this new experience that you had, and you're telling people about it.
Right.
And then, as we would say in the church, sharing the gospel.
Right.
So so you're fervent. You're out there now. So now you mentioned that in the small group, then or in the group, you're talking about the more conservative, and then kind of sharing what's right, what's wrong. So when you're at that point, you're a new believer. Did you already have a grid of like, I don't know if I like this, or did you kind of just receive it all and then?
Oh, I was completely hungry for it.
Okay. So
I wanted to read the Bible in a year, and I did. I didn't understand it, but I did read it, and I did seek out more and more mentors, and.
Yeah. So you're soaking it all in.
I was soaking it all in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So then you're moving on. So at this point, what happens?
At this point, well, I'm also a musician, or my skill set is very passionate about learning instruments and learning music, and I had symphony tickets, and I would compose and write and arrange things for my ukulele group or my trumpet. I was a trumpet player. I held sectionals with the trumpet section without the teacher telling us that we do those things. So I was very passionate. So I had been developing this field in this field of music and directing, and I went in that direction for college. Meanwhile, with all my passion and zeal for God, I was starting groups as well, and people older than me would say, "Oh, you should go into full-time ministry." And to me, actually, that was the highest compliment at that point.
Yeah,
I just thought,
because you're really into this thing, and then you're being accepted.
Yeah.
And people are seeing you have potential in doing this full time. Like it could be a career, a calling, right? Okay, so you're excited.
I took that as a compliment, but at the same time, I wanted to be a music director even more. Even more.
Okay.
So I started to talk to God, bargain, and say, how about 10 years as a music director, band director, and then I'll go into ministry.
Yeah, 10 years.
And
I like that.
so I had it kind of planned out, but I had a sort of a string of some unexpected events, hardships, and actually there were times that I felt so intimate with God, and so much that I wanted to do anything He wanted me to do. And a lot of times that voice would come through a person. So a person would say from the pulpit, say, if you really love God, you would blah blah blah. And I would think, I really love God, so I'm going to blah blah blah. And so there was a season of that, and so I had this sort of, it's a separation of or a sense of hearing, I'd say a lack of discernment, a lack of separation of what was God's voice. So I think it's fairly normal. I guess when you're new to spirituality, that you don't know quite where God's voice comes from, how it feels like, and so the easiest thing is to take what people say, other spiritual authorities. And so I had this sense that I needed to choose my career and that choosing ministry would be the better choice because it honors God.
So
and music does not.
Tension with the music.
In my brain.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that discernment yet, and so when push came to shove, I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to give up my music in order to follow you. And at that point, I thought it was going to be being a missionary in Brazil or South America. I went to a missions conference and went in those booths, and everybody across the board was telling me, well, go to seminary then. If you're going to be a mission, go to seminary. So
because that's the hoop.
yes,
You gotta go through,
yes,
right?
yes.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So I gave up my music career. Actually, yeah, I had some hard things happen in that. But anyway, I switched gears, and I did get my college degree in music education. So I did develop that skill set to it. I think to a very far degree because I was quite passionate about being a music director. But instead of going into the workplace at that point, I went to seminary to train to be a missionary in South America.
To South America.
Yeah.
And then was that the one in the East Coast?
Well,
Is that right?
it was in the Midwest, and little did I know I would lose my faith there, and that would be the first, diversion.
So just to kind of see the bird's eye view here, you hear Jesus is the Son of God, and you just receive it as like, I think this is true, and you start kind of investigating more, become part of a church community, and now you've got all this fervor and everything's clicking, and then you have music or ministry of being a minister full time, and then you choose ministry because that seems like the right thing to do. Like, I'm going to give my life to God, and then it's like, okay, now the next hoop then is seminary.
Right.
You go there, and then you say you lose your faith at that point.
I lost my faith.
So that's like, that must have been. It sounds devastating.
It was. It was.
So can you talk about, whatever you want to share about that process? How that was, and then moving forward from there too.
Sure. I think that was actually the one very important life change that I go back to being so grateful that I went through.
Wow.
It devastated me, like you said. It was quite devastating. The root of that, there's a couple of things that led up to that. Is that I came from Hawaii, so it's a island far away from the rest of the mainland.
Yeah.
And I for the most part, only came to the mainland on trips, 1 or 2 week trips. And so this is a huge move to move away from the islands. And we have a majority. I happen to be Japanese American, which we were the majority in Hawaii, to a place where they've never seen a Japanese American.
So
I mean, they say,
weird,
"Oh, I knew a Japanese American. Do you know so and so?" And like we all know each other,
Yeah.
So
People
that was very.
It was kind of neat that you're from Hawaii, or different. At least,
I didn't feel like I was neat. I mean, I felt like they didn't assume that you were from Hawaii. They assumed you were different. So you said, "Oh, where are you from?" And
So that was a different experience. Going from the majority to.
Right. So it was lonely. The culture was very different. And then I had a few things going on in Hawaii that I thought I'd go back to. I thought I'd go back to settle down. I thought I'd go back to a church job that my church had given me an impression, at least, that they were grooming me for a position.
Like you're gonna go get the degree, and then come back,
and then come back.
Have your job and everything set up back in Hawaii.
Right. And then have this thing going on with Brazil. I don't know how it was going to
it
happen,
was gonna
but
work out,
it was all there somewhere in my head.
Yeah.
Then I was thrown into this Bible class that it was a general. What do you call those?
Like general ed or
general ed. Yeah.
Basic.
The mandatory
So
ones.
this is like Bible Christian minister college, right? So
Yeah.
This is the math class that you have to take, the English class you have to take.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I get thrown in this Bible class, and they tell me that the Bible is not inerrant, and that it actually comes from these 4 streams. This redactive criticism, basically, or historical criticism, JDEP. And so it's well, they took the position that they were right. It wasn't like, oh, this is the way some people view the Bible. But so I was introduced to this reductive criticism that I thought, wait a minute, that's not what I heard. Yeah.
So when you say the Bible is inerrant, that means that it's not, there are no errors?
There are no errors, and the assumption that it came from God. It came from, God through whoever is writing it. The first 5 books came through Moses, that Moses wrote it. And that was my view. That was my simplified view of how we got scriptures.
Yeah.
And so to be told, no, it doesn't. It comes from this myth, and this stream of stories here, and this stream of stories here. And so it's a very extremely opposite view.
Oh, I see. So then, all right. So I think I got it flipped there. So, so the college was teaching you that
it is not inerrant.
It is not inerrant.
It's not inerrant.
So that it's got a lot of flaws and that there's myths and
right.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So the truth upon which I've settled on is somewhere in the middle of that.
Got it.
So yeah.
Okay. So at the time you're hearing this, the college is teaching you, and sometimes and we've for those of us who've been in class, right, there might be things thrown at you where you think, whoa, that's totally different. I don't know if I agree with that, but then we can kind of be open and kind of learn, and then maybe broaden our perspective, and over time we're like, oh, maybe that's true. Or sometimes we just hear something, we just reject it, like, no way. So what was it like for you when you first heard in that class?
I was not ready to hear that discussion. I'd heard no other discussion than that the word is inerrant. The Bible is inerrant. And so there was no space in my brain for something different. And that was radically different. It's not only that it's not inerrant, but it's wildly different. It comes from different human myths and stories. So,
so what happens in your brain now? So something has to be
right.
bubbling, something's brewing, right? So
right.
Happening?
I don't remember how I made it through that. Of course, I had to pass four of those types of courses to graduate. So I passed them. I obviously read the material and absorbed the content, and I have since forgotten it. But at that time, right, it has to go through you, and I don't think I think I just started to remove. I had to dichotomize what I was learning from what I had experienced earlier, and so I think it would have been fine had not. At the end of my seminary, and I did push forward till I got that degree because
finished.
I did finish because.
And when did this class happen? Like early on, I'm guessing. It was
yeah. I mean the first semester.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's was it a 2-year?
2-year.
Okay, so
you
you
program.
powered through.
I powered through.
And then when you graduated at that point, where would you say your faith was at? Like, did you believe? Did you not believe?
Yeah, see, I was probably teetering for a good year and a half.
Okay.
And to find at the end of that not only did this inerrancy thing not resolve itself in my brain, but everything that I'd planned to go back to in Hawaii just kind of fell apart. And in my mind, I knew I could have stayed in Hawaii. I could have kept it going, and it probably would have worked out fine. Probably would have settled down there. Probably would have had some kind of ministry, something position. Yeah. But none of that worked out. In fact, the doors they slammed in front of me. Slammed in front of me. Everything that I was looking toward just slammed, basically.
Wow. So this would be, I can imagine at this time if you're talking with someone, and for those of you, I'm a person of faith. I would say I'm a Christian, so in terms of that context of like what religion, but I also started as an atheist, and so I understand that mindset and that process, and so I'm thinking about putting myself in your place. At that point, if someone came up to me and said, "Well, see," right? So you thought something was true, and then you had a community bring you in. Looks like they turned your back on you. You went to this institution that they say is holy and supposed to like help you get there, and then that failed you. See, there is no God. See, there, and I would weigh that, at that time. So,
right.
So what happened with you? Things sound tough. How did things kind of turn around?
Yeah, that's where I'm so thankful for my earlier experiences with God, and so that's why on this day when I'm asked when did conversion happen, there's more to it than that day when I felt a little tricked. There's experiences, there's times when I related personally to God. I put my heart on the line, and if you're there, God, please help me win. And I'm not saying he should do that, but it happened to be a grace upon me at that moment, and it ended up being a special memory.
So the bowling thing, this is really interesting. So in a sense, the bowling thing, like regardless of all that stuff that happened, the bowling thing maybe was at a special place in your heart.
It was important, yeah. It was.
This crazy stuff I don't understand. I'm losing my faith, but that bowling thing.
Yeah.
That was true.
It was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And that sense of that shower, that shower at the beach. Yeah. Before I even did anything for him, quote, when people were saying, "Oh, this is to be a good Christian, you need to share your faith and all that," and I was more than willing. Before I did any of that, he loved me, and he had a relationship with me.
I just got chills.
Yeah.
That's the story of Jesus, really.
It
right?
is.
Jesus, God says, "This is the Son whom I love."
Yeah.
Before he did anything. Anyways, just I love. We'll come back to that. Okay,
yeah.
So you're before you did anything, just those real, authentic, true moments of God and you.
Yeah. Now it didn't. It took me 3 months to get there. So I did lose my faith. I was an atheist for 3 months because I was just so devastated that everything I thought he was leading me toward ended up being not the thing he was leading me toward. Yeah. And that to me was happily ever after. I gave you everything, God, and so therefore I should live happily ever after. Well, it didn't happen. In fact, got none of that. And so I just thought, well, I guess God must not exist because I gave you everything. You didn't.
Right.
Yeah. So forget you.
Wow. Yeah. So for 3 months you're there, and it's totally understandable. I think anyone listening to this story, it's like it didn't work out.
Right.
I tried.
Right.
I didn't try.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But slowly I did realize that that's quite devastating because everything that I had built my life on up to that point was with the knowledge and assumption that I had a purpose, and that I was going somewhere. Even so, after I died, I was going toward something. I was going toward this place where God was going to be. Yeah. And if God's not there, then I don't have any place to look forward to going. No there's no heaven to be with God, and then there's no purpose to being on this earth because it was all about bringing people to God. And so it's like there's nothing.
Falling. It's like there's no purpose.
Yeah. It's very, very dark. It's very different. Yeah. So I began to just logically think, I don't think that could be true. And I wasn't ready emotionally, but I stayed there for 3 months, and it's funny. All I had was this master's in church music, right? So I have no job at the end of seminary, and all I have is this degree in church music. Yeah. And who's going to hire me?
And it was specific, it was church music.
Yes, specifically, yeah. So here I am, this athist, and
with a degree in church music.
Yeah. So what am I going to do now?
Where are the opportunities now?
Right.
Okay. So something happens, right?
So I get out a map and thinking, where should I go next? Because God doesn't exist, so I should go where I want to go. And I had a friend in California who said, "Come out here." I came out. Just one of those weeks, just meeting up with my old friends from the islands, from locally here and in LA, and ended up at one Sunday at a church. And on that Sunday, the music minister, the choir director, made an announcement that that was his last day. it was, everybody was devastated. He was very well liked, and then my friend turns to her friend. She said, "You know what? Carolyn has a master's in church music," and at that point, a bunch of them said, "Hey, you want to get lunch?" So so they started, they said, "So what's this about you having a master's in church music?" So she just came out from Kentucky. So anyway, they pretty much hired me on the spot. Never having asked the question, "Do you believe in God?" So funniest thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
And then you accept it. So
I accept it.
I could also see maybe you're like, this whole church thing, I'm done with this. I don't want to be in the church. But for some reason you were. So culturally, I was comfortable with that group of people. Of course, I've been around the church for some years now. So I found myself a job. I just had to work on the believing in God part. But fortunately, they didn't ask that. And actually, I did quite well. I think I was so eager to start off well. Because here I had all these doors closed to me. I thought, of course, you think it's me. Something's wrong with me. I must be flawed. But at the same time, I had being in this lonely place. I had this sort of vision start to come up in me, and I really had a desire to do a great job. And so I did a pretty I think I had a lot of energy. I put a lot of energy into it, and they eventually asked me if I would also be their youth director, and that of course requires that you work out is there a God or not, because then you have to. So there were some pointed questions.
Yes, they in my head they never asked it, but yes.
But maybe so, you're like, hey, I better. It should be real to me if I'm going to be working with the youth in this way.
Right. Yeah. So fortunately, they sent me back to seminary. So I did another degree at that point, and that was really, I think I had the experience and maturity to try to process these contradictions, these conflicts that had come up. And so that was a very healing experience. I entered into probably a good 5 years of intensive healing, just going through seminary, and I did get that degree to entered into the pastoral ministry as associate pastor, entered into a lot of healing groups, a lot of counseling. Yeah.
So at this point you went through a second hoop with the whole college for pastors thing, right? The second seminary, and then after that you finished that one, and then got a job as a pastor. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like things are kind of working out. And then was it in that time you found your faith again?
I did. Yeah. Soon after going back to seminary, or even before that, soon after taking the job as a youth director, I began to, once you verbalize, you have to think it through and just saying, okay, well, I don't know what happened then, but I do know that God is real, so I can say that much. Or I do know this, and I could slowly piece together what I did know. And the experience of going back and in a healthier seminary environment, both probably healthier there and my state of health as well, being able to process and have and know that it doesn't have, you don't have to believe this extreme, but there are a myriad amount of combination choices that you can make within what you know. So we know that, okay, unfortunately the Bible does have errors. When we do exegetical criticism, you see, okay, this earlier manuscript did not have this word. They needed to add this word in order for it to make sense. And then it gets translated, and then you have these various ways of translating it. And you see, you can't say it's inerrant, because you do have missing words.
And you're saying because the Bible's been translated many times with good intentions, right? So it's more readable, more understandable.
Right.
But because of all those translations, those iterations of it.
You can't use that word. The people will say, well, in its original version, what I mean is in its original version it was inerrant. But we don't have that original version, so we can't say that.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge there's some degree of error, but we make choices, and if we keep our priorities as such, there is still a way to embrace that the Bible is still inspired by God. So both inspired and authoritative. So those are the two words I've landed on, and I feel as an evangelical Christian, which I consider myself, part of evangelical group, that those two are words that I can comfortably settle on. It's completely, I will take the word as much as I can, word for word, but within the framework of understanding the whole of the Bible, which is an expression of God's authority and his love for us.
Yeah. So it's I think what I'm kind of getting here is that the interpretation is, for me, I'm just reflecting on what how I view it, right? And that the Bible may not be that every single word, every single comma, period is like exactly where it should be, that kind of thing. But there's still truth in it,
Right.
and that truth is authoritative. Like it is something that I want to live by. That truth can change the world in a good way. Those kind of things where it's something I follow, right? So, anyways, I'm just kind of reflecting back. So is that kind of where, in general, kind of where you landed then? Kind of just that it's, so not every single word or every single comma thing, but that there's truth in it, and that truth is worth something, that it has authority.
Yeah, it is central. I would say it's central to my life, and it is the best we have to giving us God's heart and a picture of who God is. And so it's a lot better than any other thing that I can rely on. So.
All right. So wow, this is great. So we've gone this whole journey with Carolyn Iga, right? Your faith journey, and then where we've landed here is that we're talking about the Bible. We're talking about, and then you have to closely relate the Bible to what you believe and your faith. I think people can kind of understand that, right? Like the Bible, what the word of God says, and then whether or not you believe in that word is like where your faith comes in.